We all love to play game, but did you know how they started? If not, let me allow you to tell something about it. Hey guys, welcome to our channel. We are going to take you long back in 1900s and gonna tell you how video games started, so subscribe if you like this video. Let's begin. In October 1958, physicist William Higginbotham created what is thought to be the first video game. It was a very simple tennis game, similar to the classic 1970s video game Pong, and it was quite a hit at a Brookhaven National Laboratory open house. Higginbotham was born on October 25, 1910 in Bridgeport, Court and grew up in Caledonia, NY. He graduated from Williams College in 1932, and then went to graduate school in physics at Cornell University. At Cornell as a graduate student he worked as an electronics technician. In 1941, he joined the MIT Radiation Lab, where he worked on cathode ray tube displays for radar systems. In 1943 he moved to Los Alamos to work on electronics for a timing system for the atomic bomb. In 1948 he joined Brookhaven National Laboratory's instrumentation group. He served as head of that group from 1951 to 1968. During that time, in October Brookhaven held annual Visitors' Days, during which thousands of people would come tour the lab. Higginbotham was responsible for creating an exhibit to show off the instrumentation division's work. Most of the existing exhibits were rather dull. Higginbotham thought he could better capture visitors' interest by creating an interactive demonstration. He later recalled in a magazine interview that he had thought it might liven up the place to have a game that people could play, and which would convey the message that our scientific endeavors have relevance for society. The instrumentation group had a small analog computer that could display various curves, including the path of a bouncing ball, on an oscilloscope. It took Higginbotham only a couple of hours to conceive the idea of a tennis game, and only a few days to put together the basic pieces. Having worked on displays for radar systems and many other electronic devices, Higginbotham had no trouble designing the simple game display. Higginbotham made some drawings, and blueprints were drawn up. Technician Robert Dvorak spent about 2 weeks building the device. After a little debugging, the first video game was ready for its debut. They called the game Tennis for Two. Players could turn a knob to adjust the angle of the ball, and push a button to hit the ball towards the other player. As long as they pressed the button when the ball was in their court, players couldn't actually miss the ball, but if they hit it at the wrong time or hit it at the wrong angle, the ball wouldn't make it over the net. Balls that hit the ground would bounce like a real tennis ball. When the ball went off the court or into the net, players hit a reset button to start the next round. Tennis for Two had none of the fancy graphics video games used today. The cathode ray tube display simply showed a side view of a tennis court represented by just two lines, one representing the ground and one representing the net. The ball was just a dot that bounced back and forth. Players also had to keep score for themselves. The game circuitry was fairly simple, using mostly resistors, capacitors and relays, though it did use transistors for the fast switching needed when the ball was in play. Visitors loved it. It quickly became the most popular exhibit, with people standing in long lines to get a chance to play. The first version, used in the 1958 Visitors' Day, had an oscilloscope with a tiny display, only 5 inches in diameter. The next year, Higginbotham improved it with a larger display screen. He also added another feature: the game could now simulate stronger or weaker gravity, so visitors could play tennis on the Moon, Earth or Jupiter. After 2 years, Tennis for Two was retired. The oscilloscope and computer were taken for other uses, and Higginbotham designed a new Visitors' Day display that showed cosmic rays passing through a spark chamber. Higginbotham, who had already patented 20 inventions, didn't think his tennis game was particularly innovative. Although he saw that the Brookhaven visitors liked the game, he had no idea how popular video games would later become. even had he had the foresight to patent the game. Since he worked at a government lab, the federal government would have owned the patent, so he wouldn't have made any money from it. It never occurred to me that I was doing anything very exciting. The long line of people either was not because this was so great but because all the rest of the things were so dull, he once said. Tennis for Two was more or less forgotten for some time. In 1964, Sanders Associates received the first patent for a video game. Magnavox bought the patent and produced video game systems beginning in the early 1970s. Competitors wanting to break the Magnavox patent found out about Higginbotham's earlier video game and he was called to testify, but the case was settled out of court. Higginbotham only became well known as the inventor of the video game after an article appeared in Creative Computing magazine in 1982. The hardware in the 2600 was quite sophisticated at the time, although it seems incredibly simple now. It consisted of MOS 6502 microprocessor Stella, a custom graphics chip that controlled the synchronization to the TV and all other video processing tasks, 128 bytes of RAM, 4 kilobyte ROM-based game cartridges. The chips were attached to a small printed circuit board, PCB, that also connected to the joystick ports, cartridge connector, power supply and video output. Games consisted of software encoded on ROM chips and housed in plastic cartridges. The ROM was wired on a PCB that had a series of metal contacts along one edge. These contacts seated into a plug on the console's main board when a cartridge was plugged into the system. When power was supplied to the system, it would sense the presence of the ROM and load the game software into memory. Systems like the Atari 2600, its descendant, the 5200, Coleco's ColecoVision and Mattel's Intellivision helped to generate interest in home video games for a few years. But interest began to wane because the quality of the home product lagged far behind arcade standards. But in 1985, Nintendo introduced the Nintendo Entertainment System, NES, and everything changed. The NES introduced three very important concepts to the video game system industry: using a pad controller instead of a joystick, creating authentic reproductions of arcade video games for the home system using the hardware as a loss leader by aggressively pricing it, then making a profit on the games themselves. Nintendo's strategy paid off, and the NES sparked a revival in the home video game market that continues to thrive and expand even now. No longer were home video game systems looked upon as inferior imitations of arcade machines. New games that would have been impractical to create for commercial systems, such as Legend of Zelda, were developed for the home markets. These games enticed many people who had not thought about buying a home video game system before to purchase the NES. Nintendo continued to develop and introduce new game consoles. Other companies, such as Sega and Sony, created their own home video game systems. Let's look at the core parts of any current video game system. Thank you for watching. We hope you have liked the video. For more historical content, subscribe and like this video.